Whiskey for the Ages is not sponsored or endorsed for any product or program mentioned in this show and receive no remuneration from their creators.
Hello everybody, and a warm welcome back to our Whiskey for the Ages podcast subscribers. I'm your host Brian Dawson. Tonight, Hannah's here to my left.
Big thank you to those of you who are tuning in for the very first time with us.
And Laura's on remote, back at school.
Yep, I'm back.
Yeah.
One more semester.
Yeah.
One more semester.
Here we go.
Woohoo! So, like we always say, we hope you enjoy our show and consider subscribing to the podcast as well. Tonight, we're going to do a special how-to show, one with a fact or fiction twist.
According to the Dawsons.
Yeah, we'll be sharing what we've learned about rye whiskey and rye bourbon.
I'm sure everyone has heard it said, or maybe you've even said it, that rye whiskey is spicy. This is something that we've talked quite a bit about, even just in the last episode.
But is it really true?
In my opinion, no. And that's something that I mentioned in the last episode as well, that I think it's a common thing for people to say that rye whiskey is spicy, and I don't get a spicy element when I have it. It's all down to freshness myself.
Well, Laura, what do you think?
Some of them, yeah, I will say are spicy, but they're more on the peppery side of spicy. Like, there's different ways to view spicy. There's the sweet way where you got all your cinnamon, like nutmeg, all that, and then you have your savory ones, which are like your salt and pepper, and I tend to find that the ones I think are spicy are savory, and then the other ones, I think they're more grainy than spicy. So it's kind of like 6 of one, half a dozen between the two.
Now, for this show, we're going to be focusing on American whiskey, predominantly American ryes, or even some bourbons. But it can apply to any whiskey with rye in their makeup. Canadian rye. You know,
Yep.
That's the first one that comes to mind. You know. But before we get to our first pour, we're going to take a step back in time a little bit. Remember from our last podcast about food pairing, specifically bread? Tonight, we've got some rye bread. We thought we would tempt our taste buds first with some rye, and I know Laura's been sampling the rye bread she made. We don't have any of that.
Hannah told me a couple of days ago, she's like, you got any rye bread? I'm like, no, you just have cracked wheat bread. And she's like, oh, well, we're planning on having rye bread for this podcast, so you should have rye bread with us. And I'm like, oh, okay. I made it. I will say this one's better than the last one I made. It's not as sweet, which is great.
So the rye bread we've got, of course we can't taste Alora's, and I wish we could, but I went to the grocery store and I bought over-the-counter, Oro Wheat is the brand, but I'm sure that there's
Not
other
sponsored.
other brands out there. What do you think, Hannah? Tastes like rye bread.
It tastes like rye bread. You've got a maltiness to it. It's not particularly sweet like you'd get from a white bread or any other bread quite like that. However, there is like a slight freshness that comes in at the back of the palate, but it's not a particularly strong freshness. It's a very earthy kind of freshness. Not
I can
citrusy.
tell you where that's from. Rye bread almost always has caraway seeds. Mm-hmm. And caraway seeds bring that earthy, almost sweet note. it's kind of like a signature, like you have your cracked wheat bread, that has like the wheat nuggets, if you will. It has what it's called cracked wheat. It has oats occasionally. Rye bread tends to have caraway seeds. I like to put fennel seeds as well as caraway seeds in mine. Mine currently has that right now, and it just brings a little bit more of a sweetness, almost aniseed.
See, I love pastrami, and specifically pastrami on rye. I can hardly eat rye bread without thinking of pastrami, which is really savory.
But this isn't peppery. Like,
no.
Yes, it's savory, but it's not evoking any kind of bite.
No. So, we've got a baseline.
Yeah.
This is our rye.
This is what rye tastes like in its basic level.
Yep. So we're going to jump in and introduce our first whiskey. Bulleit Rye. Probably one of the most popular ryes in the bar. Most bartenders will have Bulleit Rye somewhere on their shelves. Category, it's an American rye whiskey. Distillery is Diageo's standalone Bulleit distilling facility in Shelby County, Kentucky. And also it's coming out of Lawrenceburg, Indiana. Now, Lawrenceburg, Indiana, the biggest distillery around that area, of course, is MGP. And they don't really let anybody know for sure how much the blend is or what blend it is, but I'm kind of thinking there's a lot of MGP in here. Mash bill on this guy, look at that rye content. 95% rye and only 5% malt barley. Barrel char's unpublished, the barrel entry's unpublished, the age statement's unpublished, our ABV or our alcohol level 45% or 90 proof. We paid $30.95 here just a couple weeks ago for this bottle.
We tried to make sure that for the purposes of this test, all of the products that we're going to be trying today, they're all pretty accessible and not too high on that price point. So this may be something that you write down and you participate in yourself one day. Go find these out there. Okay. But we're starting with Bulleit.
Before we start talking about what it tastes like and that sort of thing, I'll give you a quick primer on rye whiskey versus bourbon. A rye whiskey is rooted in American history. Back in the 1700s, Monongahela rye originated in Pennsylvania's Monongahela Valley. In fact, rye whiskey was one of the first grain to gain widespread recognition. With Old Overholt, believe it or not, Old Overholt, it's the oldest continuously used trademarked American whiskey. It got its trademark in 1810. To be labeled rye whiskey, the product must contain at least 51% rye. The second grain could be corn or some other, in this case, it's barley. Rye could have a third or even a fourth grain as well. Bourbon, on the other hand, must contain 51% corn. Its second grain is often rye, and when rye is the second grain, it could be included at low or high percentage. The second grain could be wheat as well. It is said that wheat provides a little bit of softness.
And that rye is supposed to provide the spice. So we're playing around here.
Bourbon may also have a third or fourth grain. It's usually malted barley. The barley's primary purpose is to serve as a source for the sugars so that the yeasts used have something to eat.
Barley's a good stabilizer.
Rye and bourbon must be aged in new charred oak barrels. Most other processes are similar as well, although rye machinery may have more filters, but more on that later. Generally speaking, bourbon is sweeter and smoother, with flavors of caramel, vanilla, and oak, while rye tends to be spicier, but we're going to find that out, with notes of pepper, clove, and herbs. Now, back to that Bulleit Rye. What do you guys think?
First off, I actually took a little bit of my rye bread and gave it a good inhale, a good nose, and then did the same with the rye itself. and you can definitely follow the rye between the food and the whiskey. It was a really interesting little experiment there. I really enjoy this rye whiskey. I really enjoy Bullet Rye. It's not one that we have in our bunker too often, but it's a simple rye. You can definitely get that flavor from the bread. A lot of freshness that comes in. Again, I don't really get a whole lot of spice, whether it's a baking spice or a savory spice like pepper. What I do get is a really, really nice fruity sweetness that comes in the finish, exclusively in the finish. It takes a little bit to pop up, but then all of a sudden it's there, and it's just pleasant. I don't get heat. I don't get pepper. I'm getting what I come to expect from rye.
But it's got 95% rye.
But it's got 95% rye. So in theory, the pepperiness should be right there. The heat should be right there. This is a 90 proof product. It's not outrageously high in proof. It's a pretty standard proof point for a lot of things you'd find in a bar or in a liquor store. I would expect, if we're going by the supposition that rye is supposed to be spicy, I'd expect a lot more bite out of this. This is not biting at all. It's very soft. Very approachable.
Laura, your take.
I really like this rye. Hannah, that's a really, really good experiment, like taking a nose of the bread and then a nose of the whiskey. I kind of did a bit of an opposite to that, but with tasting, I tasted the whiskey and then took a bite of bread and then kind of reversed that process. Again, you can follow that train route, like, very, very, very easily. I don't know if I really get fruity sweetness out of it, but going off of the ingredients that I used for rye bread, like, I didn't have any pepper in my rye bread. So it makes me wonder if other rye breads have pepper or use it to, have that kind of spiciness. There's not really much spice in this, I don't think.
Other than your caraway and fennel.
Yeah.
But
even then, it's hard to detect. It's kind of like a sugary sweetness for me. So I wonder if it's kind of like a molasses kind of note.
Okay.
I don't know.
What about you?
Interesting. I don't get the fruit either, but it's certainly not spicy. I would not classify this as a spicy whiskey.
Not even close. Not even close.
Well,
yeah.
Myth 1, busted.
So far, anyway. So far, we've got a few others that we're going to be trying to hunt down this supposed spice in a rye for.
So we're going to jump right into our second pour. I'll give you the background on it. It's a Knob Creek rye. Okay, this is a small batch rye whiskey, Claremont, Kentucky, here in the United States. Knob Creek is your distillery. The mash bill is unpublished. It's at least 51% rye, and I've done some internet research on it. The consensus is it's a very low rye whiskey, about 55% rye, maybe 35% corn and 10% malt barley. Barrel char on this guy is number 4. Keep that in mind. We'll talk about barrel char in a little while. Barrel entry proof is unpublished. Its age is also not published. Here we're looking at an ABV of 50% alcohol or 100 proof, and this one's a little more expensive at $39. Bought here in Idaho. Why do people say rye is spicier than bourbon? Somebody might ask, is it always true? Well, we kind of dispelled that a little bit. Let's begin by discussing how someone might identify rye in a whiskey. A lot of people feel a tingling sensation in their mouth, especially in the middle and back of your tongue.
Now, this is going to be a different kind of tingling than the tingling you'd have from just having a higher proof alcohol, because obviously that's going to impart its own essence to it. But when we're talking a rye tingle, it's not too far from the sensation that you might get from smelling something spearmint or tasting something very minty and bright. Like it kind of sinks in, provides almost a little bit of coolness. Woo! Something happened.
You might taste flavors like black pepper, cinnamon, or even clove.
Well, that's what we're trying to figure out here. All three of those are heavy in spice.
Yes. Heavy rye forward or higher proof whiskeys usually will have a lingering spice to them. Smoother ryes tend to fade fairly fast. Now, I would tell you that Bullet, for me, the finish faded pretty fast. So it was a fairly smooth one as well. It may even be more herbal or grassy.
That I would agree with for sure for ryes.
So now on to the science here, rye versus corn. The grain's role in its spiciness. Rye grain has a higher level of ferulic acid and phenols. Now we're getting real technical here. Ferulic acid contributes peppery or spiciness to the flavors we might detect. Phenols produce earthy, grassy, and herbal notes. Phenols also contribute to that dryness, and I would almost dare say some of that freshness you're talking about.
Yep, probably. I would say so.
These compounds break down during the fermentation and distillation. Rye has a lot of complex starches in it, and those starches tend to help enhance bolder flavors. Corn, by nature, is sweeter. It has simpler starches and a naturally high sugar content. I was telling somebody the other day we were doing this podcast, and they said, well, you certainly don't hear of rye syrup. You'd hear of corn syrup all the time as a sugary substance.
Because it's a simple sugar. Simple sugars versus complex sugars, whether you're talking starches or just carbohydrates in general, the chemical structure of each. The simpler one, well, obviously, there's less going on with it. There's less twists and turns. There may be less atoms making up that molecule in total versus something that's a bit more complex that may have a lot of twists and turns in it, that may have a lot more bonding going on between everything on a molecular level. So it's harder to break down. It lingers more. It'll carry a bit more of a flavor punch than something that's simple and sugary like a corn syrup will.
Organic chemistry.
With Hannah. Yes.
I like that. Organic chemistry.
Hey, I'd rather learn it from you than any other format, honestly, because you can lay it down for me in terms I can understand.
So what about this one? Knob Creek Rye. What do you think?
Well, it tastes
completely
different
Yep.
from the Bullet.
Yeah. It's certainly different from the first one in that I actually do get that spice. I actually do get that black pepper. I get it in the taste. I get it in the smell. I also get it a bit in the finish.
And I'm getting it in the back of my throat.
Yeah, and it seems like it elevates the bread too. I don't know. Like if you wanted to add a briny note to your bread, have this.
For sure, it does not have the amount of rye in it that the Bullet had. It's crazy to me that this is spicy.
So that really begs the question here as far as what we're debating and talking about. If it's the rye right now that's doing that. Chemically, based on everything you just said, that's what we would have to conclude. But there was a lot of other differences between this and the Bullet than the simple fact that there's rye in this. There was also a lot of corn in this as well.
That's true.
We know what the barrel char of this was, and it's
Exactly.
a high char. We know that the proof was higher on this by a fairly, it's a significant margin.
We're 90 proof on the Bullet versus 100 proof on this one. So yes, it's going to be a little hotter. But to me, I don't get the heat from the proof. I'm getting the heat from some other element.
But that also begs the question about proof. I've had plenty of 100 proofs that just don't feel like 100 proof. I've had 120s that don't feel like 120s. I've had 90s that feel harder than 90s. So does proof really have anything to do with this? Making it more spicy, more in your face. Honestly.
Well, I think it could be a mixture of both the proof and the char. And keep in mind, the other thing we haven't mentioned yet is with all whiskeys, in order for any fermentation to go on, you have to introduce yeast.
And we're going to talk about yeast.
Okay, good.
We're going to get there.
Because that's an important part of it. There's a lot of different strains of yeast. Right now, wherever you're sitting, wherever you're breathing air, you're breathing in live yeast. It is a constant around you.
It's why bread is so old.
And
it's why bread is so old. Because all you gotta do is just do flour and water.
Well,
that's it.
What I'm saying is each yeast is going to contribute a little bit something different to it. You know, our Uncle Mark, he has 2 different sourdough starters. One of them is in the big old city, and then the other one is way out in the middle of nowhere in a cabin. The yeasts that are between those 2 environments are really different, and it makes a strong impact on the bread that he makes, which otherwise is the stable control part of his cooking experience. So I wonder if in this case we're tasting the Jim Beam Funk. This is Knob Creek, but the overriding here is Beam Suntory.
And you know, I do get a little nut here.
Yeah. So,
and I do get a little oak here.
So I really wonder if part of that spice could be the yeast coming into it a little bit.
And we often talk in our reviews about barrel spice. Is it that char that is impacting what's going on in our throats?
But that being said, I can still taste the actual rye that's similar to the rye bread. I can really get it more on the nose than I can in the taste. But the maltiness is there in the whiskey. There's a nice malt thing going on that translates well over to the bread.
It's really nice when you take a bite of bread and then you take a drink of whiskey, because the rye that we're drinking right now, it's almost like the bread has an effect on the whiskey too, in that it makes it sweeter. At least mine does. My rye bread has a bit of sweetness to it. I don't know about your guys' rye bread.
I think it makes it taste saltier.
For me, I like the bread better with the bullet than I like it with the...
Yeah.
I'd actually disagree, but that's only because it's my bread.
Right,
so.
right, yeah. I mean, and then...
I don't really hold much of a factor, guys.
Yeah, and then for those who may be curious, you know, keeping score at home, as far as I'm concerned, I think the bullet rye tastes better than this Knob Creek. But that's just me.
So far, this Knob Creek is better with this rye, only because there's a bigger contrast of flavors I'm able to get.
So let's talk about the production factors. Hannah mentioned yeast, and we'll certainly get to that. But first, it's the mash bill. As noted, higher rye percentages tend to bring more spice. We've kind of disproven that here a little bit, haven't we?
Already, yeah.
And we're 2 whiskeys in. But rye in the mash also interacts with the other components as well. As a second or third ingredient, malt barley can enhance rye's boldness, frankly, because of the yeast that's involved. If the yeast is going to town on the barley, it's got to affect what's going on with the rye. So let's talk about yeast strains. Different yeast strains are going to produce different levels of esters and those phenols we talked about, which can either complement or downplay the spicy notes. Strains chosen for rye whiskey are often chosen to enhance the bold profile. Now, Hannah, you'd mentioned yeast. Well, yeast is certainly having an effect here. But it must be pointed out, I can't think of a single distiller that's out there that lays out there yeast for everybody to know what it is.
Yeah, we're just never going to know that.
You know, it's
kind of like bacteria.
Yeah.
Like you have more bacteria in your body than you actually are aware of. Like there's like thousands of different types of bacteria you have. So
I just thought of it now, and I didn't do the research on it, but I remember reading there was a fire in a major distillery somewhere, very well could have been Brown-Forman, that they were more worried about their yeast than they were about what else was going on.
I think that was Heaven Hill.
It could have been Heaven Hill.
And luckily, like the refrigerator that had all of the yeast strains packaged away was left safe. And
Yep.
they were very, very happy about that.
And still able to use it. Yeast, like I say, yeast details are rarely shared, but Four Roses is kind of a little bit of an exception. Four Roses has 2 different mash bills they use and 5 different yeast strains. Now, they're not divulging what makes up that yeast and where they're getting it from. We'll talk a bit about Four Roses here. In fact, that's going to be our third pour. It's the Four Roses small batch. Four Roses out of Lawrenceburg, Kentucky. Mash bill, it's a blend of 75% corn, 20% rye, 5% malt barley, and the second mash is 60% corn, 35% rye, and 5% malt barley.
So this is what we would call a high-ride bourbon.
Yes. It uses 4 yeast strains, and then we'll get to these letters and what they all mean here in just a bit, but it's a blend of 4. Their blend is OBSK. It isn't a word. It's the letter O, the letter B, the letter S, the letter K, and then OESK, OBSO, and OESO.
And sometimes they have variations that go out on their single barrels with a couple other letters that sneak in there.
Exactly.
Okay.
And we'll talk about that too. The cask new charred oak, obviously, it's a bourbon. Barrel char, because it's got 2 different recipes, they've got barrel char 3 and barrel char 4. This is believed to be about 4 to 6 years old, although they don't publish what's going on here. The barrel entry proof is at 120.
Okay.
I say that the way I did because 125 is the max. ABV here is 45%, same percentage as the Bullet. And here we got this priced at $36.95 here in Idaho. So let's decipher those Four Roses letter recipe codes.
please do.
Yeah.
I did not care.
Yep.
Like in chemistry or anything science like that in my undergrad.
So Four Roses puts these letters on. It's not anything chemical. It's how they label things. The first letter is always O. And it's designating the Four Roses Lawrenceburg production facility. So every recipe starts out as O. The second letter designates the mash bill, which could be a B or an E. If it's a B, it's 60% corn, 35% rye, 5% malt barley. E, it's 75% corn, 20% rye, and 5% malt barley. The third letter is always S. And the reason why, this is straight whiskey. Okay? The fourth letter, these are where the 5 different yeast strains come from. Letter F emphasizes herbal notes. Letter K emphasizes a little bit of spice. Letter O emphasizes rich fruit. Letter Q emphasizes floral notes. And then letter V emphasizes a delicate fruit. In this that we're drinking, the Four Roses small batch, of the 10 possible recipes, 4 are blended together. Of course, they're not going to disclose what percentages, but the recipes O, B, S, and K and OESK mean that it's high to moderate rye, emphasizing spice, and the recipes OBSO and OESO, it's high to moderate rye again, emphasizing rich fruit. So one might expect to taste spice and fruit out of this. Now, with all that said, Anna, you're being contemplative here. What do you get?
I've gone back and forth between taking sips of the Four Roses and having a little bit of the bread. And for us and our bread over here, I'm finding it such a disparate flavor profile between the two. It's really hard for me to track the rye in the bourbon versus in the, obviously in the bread itself. It's a clash of titans as far as I'm concerned here. As far as the bourbon goes, the high rye bourbon, there is a bite here. There is a spice here. Right now I'm kind of chalking it up to the proof though, which is strange because it's a 90 proof, so the same as the bullet that we had first. This, to me, is what I normally pin a 90 proof product at as far as bite level goes. This to me is a very standard, what can I expect, what does a 90 proof product taste like? It tastes like this. It has this level of bite to it. It has this level of some spice to it, because there is some spice here. Exactly what spice? Yeah, there's a little bit of peppery notes.
I've got some clove here. And I don't usually pick up clove, but it's dark.
Yeah, it's really dark. The whole flavor profile of Four Roses small batch is dark, which matches with what we talked about with all those letters. There's some fruit here.
It's not very pronounced, though.
It's not very pronounced. I think it kind of falls more into almost a fruit leather category. It's really dried, deep and
dried leather.
Yeah, dried leather. And you get the associated spice that you would expect from a fruit leather coming out of this. What about you, Laura?
I agree with you as far as taste goes. As far as how it feels hotter than a 90 proof for me. If you asked me what the proof of this was, I'd probably say over 100. I feel the heat a lot more. I would agree that there is a spiciness to this. The pepper, I started getting a little bit of cloves, maybe a tiny bit of nutmeg. Tiny bit of nutmeg. And I would say I agree on the dried fruit aspect. I don't like dried fruits at all. Kind of getting that raisin, almost prune sort of taste as far as fruits go. I have to say I'm not as impressed as I am with the first and second one.
Interesting. Confession time for me, of the three, that's my favorite.
I'm not surprised though, because you typically don't gravitate towards ryes like I do, and you have a definite soft spot for Four Roses small batch.
I do.
So I think you kind of come into this one with almost a little bit of your own Brian Dawson bias, because this one was one of your first loves.
It was. It was one of the very first bourbons I had that actually talked to me.
Yeah.
It made me turn my head and say, oh, that's different.
I definitely think that it's probably the most complex out of the three.
There's a lot going on here.
There's a lot going on here. Today, I prefer the bullet out of all three, but I enjoy Four Roses small batch. I've always enjoyed Four Roses small batch. Going back to its comparison to the rye bread, it makes the bread taste spicier, which is
interesting.
and not really what I was expecting at all. But all of a sudden, I can get more complexity out of the bread too. So it's been really interesting watching how all of these different products are changing the bread sip to sip.
The bread for me is a bit more salty, a bit more briny when it comes to this.
It makes it more savory.
Yeah, it makes it more savory. And I think that, I do like Four Roses. I genuinely do. I think that if you were to hand me a rye, and it was like one of my first times drinking a rye, or I have this kind of idea in my head of what a rye is, this would be what I would imagine a rye to be.
But this is a bourbon.
I get what you're saying. I really get what you're saying.
Well, the thing is, it doesn't taste like a bourbon.
It really
It doesn't taste like a bourbon at all. It tastes like a rye. But that's the kind of idea that I have in my head, that this is a rye. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is indeed a rye. It does not taste sweet like a bourbon. This is not sweet to me. It's not.
So here's a case where the yeast is definitely affecting what's going on here. I mean, the yeast is doing what it's supposed to do. It's bringing out a spice element. It's bringing out a fruit element. It's got a level 3 and a level 4 char. I'm getting oak out of it. This is really interesting. I still stand by. I like this the best of the three. And maybe it's because of the complexity.
I just went back to the bullet. I still had a little bit of bullet left in my glass. I don't know if it's because we've had a couple others here. I don't know if it's because it's been able to breathe for a little bit more. All of a sudden the bullet has a little bit of heat to it. Kind of came back. But it still tastes like the rye bread. It still tastes like the rye bread. And I still really like this bullet. It's been a long time since I've had bullet rye. And each sip I go in for another. Wow, little guy, wow.
And of the three, it's the cheapest of the bunch.
And of the three.
So here's an opportunity for all of you. Here's an opportunity for you to do your own field test. Now, I know this discussion is about rye. However, wheated whiskeys tend to have a softer profile.
Or so they say.
Yes. Not so to my taste buds when it comes to larceny barrel proof offerings.
Some of those are the most dangerous,
spicy,
punchy,
and there's no rye in them.
Yeah.
Larceny.
Yeah, larceny barrel proof. Mash bill, 68% corn, 20% wheat, and 12% malt barley. No rye in it at all. They tend to run nearly as hot as Elijah Craig barrel proofs, with mash bills of 78% corn, 10% rye, and 12% barley. That would be a really low rye. Here it's Heaven Hill in action, and I think it is the yeast that's making a difference here. And barrel entry proof.
Yeah. What the general proof is when they put it in the bottle.
Exactly. Both of those products go into the barrel at 125 proof. Both of them have fairly heavy chars on them. So I think there's a lot going on those that are affecting the spice levels.
But what's the humidity like? Does that have any bearing on the yeast strains? Like,
well, it certainly has an impact on how a product ages. The movement, that's when you get into conversations about the devil's cut and the angel share with humidity and temperature, and how much things penetrate the barrel and how much of the char actually impacts the product itself when it's aging, and what the final product is in the bottle.
That's a really good question. I didn't even take that into account, but that's something really to consider as well.
I think that for the purposes of the test here, the humidity difference probably isn't going to be a whole lot different for the majority of the products that we have. Obviously, that bullet rye has a component that's coming from Indiana, but Indiana isn't that far off from Kentucky. I don't think it's going to be enough to call it an independent factor here. With
you were saying that even in the same states, like, yeast strains can be completely different.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeast strains.
So,
yeast strains. But as far as humidity goes, I don't think the humidity is going to have as much of the kind of impact that we're talking with the sample of product that we have here. Now, if we were looking at product that came from Kentucky versus product that came from New York versus product that came from Washington versus product that came from Texas, we'd have to talk about humidity a lot more.
It's way different.
Way different.
Yeah. Well, let's get back to some of these production factors, the distillation methods, or more to the point, stills. Pot stills. Pot stills, basically, think of a pot, pipe coming out the top, and distillate comes off of the pot. Pot stills retain heavier flavor compounds and often provide a fuller and more robust flavors which highlight the spice. Column stills, which are used in heavy production, produce cleaner distillates and slightly temper the rye and frankly can knock down the spiciness.
Now, what kind of material make up pot stills versus column?
They're both made out of copper.
Copper.
They're both copper.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
So now we're talking.
Heat, so that makes sense.
Yep. Now we'll talk about barrel char. When charring, a very intense heat via flames is applied directly to the interior of the barrel. Charring primes the wood. It helps the barrels to impact the spirit's flavor and, of course, its color. It creates a chemical changes in the wood. Lignin, it's the source of vanillin. The longer char enhances vanilla flavors. Hemicellulose, the intense heat breaks down the wood into sugars. The resting distillate in the barrels absorbs those sugars and imparts more of a toffee and caramel notes.
Wood as a plant is made up of, believe it or not, carbohydrates. That's that cellulose product. There's a lot of cellulose. That's a sugar. So when you burn it, when you toast it like that, you are caramelizing the sugars there. So that's what's allowing all of these other flavors to come to the forefront when you actually put the distillate, aka the white dog, into the barrel and letting it age. It gets to marry those vanilla flavors, those caramel flavors, everything else, along with the natural oak taste too.
Veggies are the same way. I mean, you hear the term caramelize your onions all the time.
Yep.
Well, you're burning the sugars of those onions.
Yep, that's exactly what you're doing.
Yep. So char levels, level 1, about 15 seconds of this high heat. Frankly, I don't know that I've ever seen a level 1 or, for that regard, a level 2 char.
At least they're not advertising it. If they
level 4.
Yeah.
Makes me wonder if other liquors.
Yeah, level 3 is usually about 35 to 45 seconds. It's probably one of the more common among the distillers. And level 4 is 55 seconds or longer, and it's often referred to as an alligator char because that's what the barrels look like on the inside after they're burned.
Like an alligator skin.
Pardon my ignorance. Could like a wine barrel be like a barrel 1 char or a barrel 2? Like,
that's very possible.
It's very possible.
You know, because you don't really see the degree of charring on a wine barrel that you'd see on a whiskey barrel.
Although I've had very smoky wines.
Right, but those would fall more into your like reds category.
Yes.
I would think that a white wine probably isn't being put in something.
They're probably not.
Very high charred. Sometimes they're even not put in a wood.
Aged in stainless steel.
Yeah, so that's a good point, Alora.
Toasting. Now, toasting is essentially lower heat for longer durations. Think of a very lightly toasted piece of bread. If you toast it, it's going to get more delicate notes, those vanillas, those coconuts, those nutmegs and caramels. In general, lower charred barrels allow more raw rye flavor to shine through. Those herbal and grassy notes are easier to detect. Higher char levels emphasize that spicy and smoky and woody flavors. Just what we found out when we were doing our test.
Like with the Knob Creek in particular, and even that Four Roses.
The barrel entry. Prior to Prohibition, entry proof was generally quite low. Around 107 proof is pretty much what they would use. Back in 1830, brands like the old Jim Crow were dispensed from barrel to glass. So they wanted to have a low proof so they could just crack open the barrel and pour it out, serve it. After Prohibition ended, regulations allowed distillers to experiment. They were believe it or not, they were putting whiskey into barrels at as much as 160 proof. I mean, that's just crazy. In 1962, maximum barrel proof was set at 125. Those higher entry proofs, they extract more tannins and wood spice from the barrel. They produce a concept of barrel proof strength. Aged product with higher proofs could be watered down, allowing more product to be released. Lower barrel entry proofs, and that's highly accepted with the craft distillers. With a low entry proof, the spirit ages more quickly, sugars dissolve more quickly, and distillers can bottle their offerings at barrel proof strength without having to cut the distillate with water. They tend to create a smoother, more balanced spirit, and it has less barrel influence. Some of those that are quite popular at lower barrel entry proof, Makers at 110 proof, Michter's at 103. We're fans of Michter's around here. And then that Weller at 114 proof. Now, we're not having any of those three tonight, the Makers, Michter's, or Weller, but here's another field test for you guys to try. Find and enjoy some of that Michter's rye. See how it compares to what else we're drinking. And then also compare Maker's Mark and Larceny. That Larceny is barreled at 125, and I dare say that's going to be quite a bit more spicy in the mouth because of that higher barrel entry.
It'll certainly feel hotter.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So barrel aging, longer aging tends to enhance more oak flavors like the vanilla and the tannins, and it's going to balance out that rye's boldness. But aging too long can subdue the raw spiciness of rye. Conversely, shorter aging tends to inhibit the distillate's maturation, making the whiskey taste and feel more harsh in the mouth. Now, let's go on to our fourth pour. Our fourth pour, Noble Oak Double Oak Rye, finished rye whiskey. Distilled in Indiana, distillery's unpublished, but it's likely MGP. Bottled by Noble Oak Brain Brew Ventures. Bottled in Newtown, Ohio, with a parent company of Edrington. Mash bill's unpublished, the barrel char is unpublished, the barrel entry proof is unpublished. However, this has finishing staves put in final finishing barrels that are port wine.
And if you recall from the last episode, we had another rye that was also finished with port wine staves. That was that Midwinter Night's Dram. This Noble Oak Double Oak is one that I love to call a dupe for that Midwinter. It's a lot more available, a lot more affordable. But like we also mentioned last episode, we found that rye paired really, really well with things that were sweet. So this port wine finish, this fortified wine, naturally has a good bond with rye.
So our price here, $29.95, and proof is only 96. I say only, that's fairly typical for what we're drinking tonight. So let's talk about barrel finishing. What the heck does barrel finishing mean? Hannah, you want to tackle that one?
Well, it can mean a lot of different things. For some products, it can mean you take it out of its newly charred oak barrel and you throw it in a barrel that used to have some other type of spirit in it. That's typically what scotches do. Tequilas do that as well to a degree. Sometimes a special finish can mean you just take a barrel that had a different spirit in it, destroy the barrel, but keep the staves intact, meaning those long pieces of wood, those curved pieces of wood, and you throw them in the oak barrel with the product as it's aging. This is what the Noble Oak Double Oak has done. Think of Maker's 46. That also kind of has that same process where instead of having 36 staves to create the barrel, they're adding 10 extra staves that have a different component, a different type of char or a different type of wood, all thrown in as well to impart different flavors.
Exactly. So they're secondary barreling.
Yes.
And that's why this particular product, Noble Oak Double Oak.
Yep.
Okay? Make sense? So what do we think? What does this Noble Oak Double Oak taste like?
I like it. I do.
I figured you would.
I would say it's easy to drink, but it's trying to give me a Kentucky hug, and I don't know why. It's probably because it is pretty easy to drink. Like, it's easy to drink in that I don't feel so much heat with it.
Yeah.
I can have a piece of bread and I can have this. And the two of them just go so well together, honestly.
The bread and the noble oak.
Yeah. I thought that the first and second ones were the best marriages between the two, between the bread and the whiskey. But this one, it's just kind of like a, oh, but you can get this flavor. Oh, but you can get this kind of flavor. What it does to the bread is it makes it more savory, but it also brings out the caraway and fennel seeds that I put in there. Likewise, the bread brings out those caraway seeds and fennel seeds in the whiskey. It's such a weird marriage, but it works.
Well, I mean, it's the same thing, like I mentioned, it's the same thing we talked about last time with the Midwinter Night's Dram with the rye, and this one isn't that far off from the Midwinter. So the pairing is right. The sweet from the port coming in with the rye bread, the combination just works. I think with this one, they enhance each other. The noble oak and the rye bread itself. I think you get a more hearty essence coming from both of them when they play off of each other. I've said it before, how all of these whiskeys are playing with the rye bread is nothing short of fascinating to me. The Bullet went hand in hand, best friends with the rye bread. The Knob Creek, they went right up against each other, toe for toe, and really enhanced, fighting for dominance there. The Four Roses with this, it made the bread taste almost spicier. This one, it makes them both stronger.
I think this almost becomes jammy. This whiskey becomes jammy.
Okay.
And I don't know if it's strawberry jam or blueberry jam or blackberry jam or some kind of berry jam, but it's just jammy. And it's that port that's doing it. I gotta believe it's the port that's doing it.
I like anything, honestly, done in port barrels. Like, if it says port, like done in port barrels, 9 times out of 10, I will probably like it.
Yep, sign you up.
One thing that we've never had before, and one thing that we probably should have and should review, would be High West's Rendezvous Rye. That, I believe, also is a port finish. And if it's not a port finish, it's a special finish. And I think that one would be very interesting to add to the dynamic.
Yeah. So bottling proof. Higher proof enhances spice perception. And I use the word perception on purpose because if you're bottling something at 114, at 120, whatever it is, it's going to be hot in the mouth. One might think that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've had some 123s and 125s that we go, this doesn't taste like a 123 or a 125. Or the mouthfeel isn't the same.
Back to the comment that I made, like, I've had 100 proofs. Some of them don't have that 100 proof funk. Others do. It's the proof, I don't know.
Yep. Beginners, the beginners of those of you out there might prefer that lower proof. It tends to be less harsh. And so then we've got the combined influence. We just played with all this stuff. Combined influence. Here's an example for you. What would you think a high rye, pot distilled, high barrel entry proof, number 4 char whiskey would have? What do you think it would have?
Well, anything that's high, char, you expect everything to be more aggressive.
Exactly.
Everything, from flavor to mouthfeel to everything. Alcohol.
Absolutely.
And I personally get dissuaded from that because if I'm so distracted by how it feels in my mouth and then how it feels in my chest, I'm having to try to find flavors. And I don't really like that. I don't like to have to try to find flavors when I could just go to another one that I'm familiar with and then be able to go on like a scavenger hunt on those things. So, yeah, aggressive, and I have no idea what the profile for flavors would be simply because of that.
Well, then let's use the second example, a low rye, column distilled, low barrel entry proof, and a number 3 char.
Soft.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And this is exactly why I always include the vital stats in my reviews, because it gives it gives me an idea. All right, what am I likely to get from this? If I know that I've got a number 4 char, I'm going in mindset. I'm looking at possible spice.
It's all about, we've talked about it before, managing expectations when you come into any product. When you know the basics of what the product is, what its makeup is, you already have an idea of what to expect and what candle to hold it to. Knowing all of the vitals really helps with that managing expectations. Know what you're getting into, know what to expect, and that way you can actually judge the product for what it really is and not whatever dream imagination you have in your head of what you want your ideal product to be. Judge it for what it's actually trying to offer. That's why we like having those vitals in there so much.
That being said,
oh, here we go.
I will agree that it is helpful to know. And it is helpful to know the sciences, and it's helpful to know the char and all of those details. I write in the vitals because Hannah and Dad do. So it's kind of like a consistency sort of thing. Like, if I didn't, then it's like, oh, is she not as knowledgeable? Well, that's it. Honestly.
So let's do this experiment, Laura.
No, the thing is, you can do these kinds of reviews and not know what those things are. That's what I do all the time.
And maybe it's better for you not to know.
Maybe.
Yeah, and honestly, it helps me not have as much bias. We talk all of the time about High West Funk. We talk about Buffalo Trace Funk. If I just see the name and I'm like, oh, well, I have these expectations, but they only go so far as to like, oh, well, there must be like a fruit profile or there must be a nut profile. I'm not thinking so far as to like what the char is going to do. Honestly, I'm not going to be thinking too much about what the mash bill is going to do. Because I do genuinely want the whiskey that I am drinking to speak for itself. It's like, despite what I have.
Okay.
Despite what baggage I carry.
Fair enough.
That's a good point.
So, I'm going to do our final pour. I'm going to give the stats, because I do, regardless of what Laura says. This one is Woodford Reserve. It's their Distiller Select. It's just the off-the-shelf product. Okay? Small batch bourbon, Kentucky. Brown Forman is the company. It's made at the Woodford Reserve Distillery. The mash bill is 72% corn, 18% rye, and 10% malt barley. Obviously, new charred oak. Barrel char of number 4, and a barrel entry of 125.
High.
Proof, 90.4.
Right at about that bullet.
Yep. So our
proof is something that I do strongly consider.
Yep.
Proof.
So now here we are at a price point of $36.95. Right in the wheelhouse of everything we've been drinking. So what do you think? What's it going to be?
Well, this is the lowest rye proportion that we've had out of all 5 so far. But it has that high barrel char. We've got that entry proof that we've been talking about. It's been clearly watered down in order to get it hovering around that 90 proof when it goes in the bottle. So I wouldn't expect for this one to bite my nose off or anything, but I would expect still some complexity from it and maybe a little bit of bite as well.
Anyway, let's dwell on that for a little bit. And one might ask, why do we not see as many rye whiskey options compared to all the bourbons that are out there? You go in the liquor store, you don't see 50 ryes.
It's true.
You see easily 50 bourbons.
It's true.
I wonder if that has anything to do with the history, because, like, corn is so important to us. Like, you'll go into any sort of history class, it doesn't matter how old you are, you will hear of corn being grown more than you will hear rye being grown. Now, this is coming from completely ignorance of which one is easier to grow, which one is easier on the soil to grow. Like, I am a complete ignorant person when it comes to that. But my instincts tell me that corn is just more common than rye, simply because of that.
Well, the first thing that needs to come out is manufacturing rye whiskey is more challenging than bourbon.
There you go.
Rye has lower yields than corn. However, you hit on something, Laura, that I'm going to bring up, even though I didn't think about it until you just said it. Corn is harder on the soil than
it's
rye
really
is.
hard on the soil.
However, it's easier to grow because it can withstand higher temperatures. So guess what they plant when the corn is down? They're planting rye in the cooler fields so that it helps reestablish the soil.
People will do the same thing with soybeans and green beans, right?
Yep. Exactly. Exactly. Distillation of rye requires greater precision to preserve a desirable spice without adding any harshness. But rye is still trickier due to some of the other challenges. During the mashing and fermentation, rye's more complex sugars and nutrients leads to really vigorous fermentation. And it actually amplifies spice to a degree that it gets too bold. But it also makes rye prone to bacterial infections. So they've got to keep it under control. Rye has a high mucilage content, which leads to stuck mashes. A stuck mash means it's getting stuck in the machines. It's clogging up the filters. Modern tools are used, modern equipment, and distillers must use more mash filters and add enzymes to improve the mash flow. So it's just harder to make. Laura, I've got to ask, what do you think about this Woodford Reserve?
Well, I forgot what it was for a second, and I just took a drink of it, and it got to me pretty bad. I could definitely get that high proof in there.
Yep, high proof. It's only 90. It's the same as the Bullet.
I don't know what happened. Maybe I'm coming down with a cold or something, because I was coughing before, but it's hard. I don't know what happened. Give me a second try.
All right. Oh, Hannah, what do you think?
I definitely know this one has the lowest rye content out of the 5 that we've had. It's by far and away the sweetest of the bunch. A lot more sugary components here. And that comes from, with Woodford, I always associate it with chocolatiness, especially, we don't have it here today, but the Woodford Double Oak, very chocolatey, very sweet, high vanilla, and maybe that's the part that's really shining through because of the barrel char being a number 4. I still really enjoy it. I do think there's an undercurrent of the rye. I can have that rye move from the bread to the bourbon. I do think that in this particular instance, it makes the rye bread taste a heck of a lot sweeter. A lot more malty, a lot more sugary. Even, all of a sudden there's a molasses coming out in the bread. So it's really interesting there. It might be my favorite combo bread whiskey so far. I still really love the Bullet Rye from the very beginning. No spice. There's no spice here. No spice. And when I say no spice, there's no spice. Like, did I say there's no spice? There's no spice, everyone. There's no spice.
So
Are
clothing.
you sure about that? Are you sure that there's no spice?
I'm pretty sure there's no spice. What about?
Interesting. Of the group, this is my least favorite. And I don't know what it is about Woodford. It's always been my least favorite.
Yeah, but what about in terms of it's rye?
It's not spicy. It's not very complex. It's sugary. It's just not in my wheelhouse. Now, that said, a ton of Woodford Reserve is sold.
It's an extremely popular product, especially around the Kentucky Derby, since it's the main Kentucky Derby sponsor.
Yeah.
People always go cocoa for Cocoa Puffs when the Kentucky Derby packaging comes out on all of the bottles. Whenever that time of year is, the spring, I think.
Yeah, and then I would also tell you that we don't have any tonight. The Double Oak, I like it way better than this.
Yeah, but the Double Oak isn't going to have as much rye in it than this.
Well, it has the same amount of rye. It's just been put in the barrel a second time.
So
anyway,
what about you, Laura? How do you think it stands up as far as rye is concerned? How is it contributing to the conversation?
I think that in terms of spice, it might have some peppery element to it. I'm trying to find the sugars that you guys are mentioning, but honestly, I'm kind of doing like a bread and whiskey analysis to this. I will agree that molasses is brought out more in the bread. It's also brought out more in here.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a different kind of sugar content. Like, molasses is different from brown sugar. It's not... Every single time I open a container of molasses, and Hannah can attest to this, I hate the smell of it. I hate the smell of molasses. And yet I love it so much when you put it into, like, cookies or, like, gingerbread molasses cookies. I love those so much. But every single time I open a package or a container of molasses, I hate it. This one, I want to say, is savory to me. I'm not, like, I'm trying to find the sugars.
Wow.
And if I do, it is, like, molasses. It's not sugars that I'm friendly with, if that makes sense. I want to say it tries to marry with the bread. Unlike the third one that we had, where I was like really trying hard to find a connection. This one wants to try to find a connection.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And it's interesting. The third one and this one are bourbons.
Yeah, the Four Roses bourbon really fought hard against the bread.
So let's wrap this up. My closing thoughts, takeaways here. Somebody might ask if someone doesn't like spicy flavors, should they avoid rye?
No.
Because pretty much, like, if you don't like spice, I'm going to ask you, well, what kind of spice do you dislike?
I think
honestly.
I think the spiciest one that we had here tonight wasn't the rye. It was the Four Roses.
Mm-hmm.
That was the spiciest one, and that's a bourbon. So
bourbons can be just as spicy, if not more.
I think that's the biggest takeaway here.
Absolutely.
They can be just as spicy, if not more. I have more notes of black pepper, of white pepper, of clove, of cinnamon, of anything of a burning kind of note. I have that quality listed under far more bourbons than I do rye. And believe me, I looked, because I actually, for this episode, went through all of my rye reviews, and to find any that I'd pinpointed a note of actual pepper spice or spice in general was a really hard task for me to do. So I think that's the biggest takeaway.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So to recap there, rye spiciness is rooted in its grain, but it's really the production decisions that play the biggest role. Not all rye whiskeys are equally spicy. Some, frankly, aren't spicy at all. Some are mellow and fruity, depending on how they're made. And bottom line, we encourage everybody to explore a variety of rye and learn your preferences. You may just find your favorite whiskey is not a bourbon, is not a scotch. It could be a rye.
Yeah, it's really, really cool.
Final thoughts on tonight's experiment?
My biggest...
I liked it. I got to bake bread for it, so I'm happy.
I think having the bread involved in this experiment was the biggest curveball to me. I was the one to suggest we have the bread coming into this episode just to act as a baseline, but tasting it as it changed through the whole evening was the biggest curveball to me, and probably my favorite part of all of this. We had a great selection here. Watching the rye move through all of them was fun.
It acted as a control group, but it also acted as like a dependent variable.
Yeah.
But no, it acted as a really, really great control group, and it helped me keep focus. That's a huge thing, because we got 5 whiskeys here. 5 whiskeys is a lot.
Palate burnout is a thing.
Yeah, it is. And with the bread, it helped keep us on task. It gave us something to absorb. I mean, we didn't sit down here, and friends, we did not pour healthy pours here.
We were pouring little tiny splashes.
Yeah, we didn't.
It was funny because Hannah and Dad were both like, "Oh, Laura, don't drink all of it." And I'm like, "I'm not going to drink all of it." And as soon as I opened the containers, I'm like, "Wow, they really thought that I could drink all of this?" Like, no, guys, no.
Yeah, the whiskey fairy was a little kind.
Yeah. So, Dad, what are your final thoughts, though?
This was fun. I went into this, did a lot of background study. I knew doing this was going to prove to me and to you guys, to everybody, rye is not spicy. It's the way it's made, the way whiskey is made, that makes something spicy or not spicy. It's the yeast, it's the char, it's the barreling, it's everything.
Yeah.
It's the distiller's
Preferences.
craft
Yeah.
that makes something spicy. Okay, let's just jump into our fortnight in whiskey. Little somber notes here. Brown-Forman axes more than 600 jobs and closes a cooperage. Brown-Forman, you guys all know by now, we're pretty much Brown-Forman fans. They've reduced its 5,400 strong workforce by approximately 12%. The math says that's about 650 people. The announcement came as part of a series of strategic initiatives to position the company for continued growth in the dynamic global spirits market. The action affects both the company's brands and their overall operations. Everybody knows Jack Daniels, Old Forester, the Woodford Reserve we've had tonight, and they've also closed their Louisville-based Brown-Forman cooperage.
Wow. I'm pretty sure that's been in the family for darn near since the beginning.
Yes. Last year they sold off another one of their cooperages to Independent Stave as well, so they no longer own their own cooperages. As well as global operations, they've got Scotch whiskey brands of Benriach, Glendronach, Glenglassa, and their tequila brands Herradura, El Jimador, and New Mix, which are their RTDs with tequila in it. Brown-Forman has said they will be supporting the departing employees with comprehensive transition agreements, including severance, outplacement services, and other benefits. And in fact, I've seen LinkedIn posts posted by Brown-Forman promoting the fact that many talented people are hitting the workforce. It's interesting to me. I've been in retail in one form or another since 1977. I've seen layoffs. I've seen reductions in force. I have never seen a company post, hey, you're going to have a lot of talent that's hitting the market right now.
Why are they doing this, though?
The reduction is expected to calm shareholders' concerns. That's the first and foremost thing. They're simplifying and streamlining the company's structure. It's allowing Brown-Forman to become more agile and efficient. Really, it comes down to trying to get rid of some expense that they have. And here we'll talk about that in my next story. Biggest cuts will be affecting Brown-Forman's cooperage, which will close by April 25th. 210 hourly and salaried employees are included in this 12% reduction. Brown-Forman will be sourcing barrels from an external supplier. Brown-Forman expects the action to deliver approximately $70 million to $80 million in annualized cost savings. The sale of the cooperage assets will generate in proceeds about $30 million in itself. Opinion, this is my opinion, cuts and restructuring appears as though it's a cost to the company. That cost is almost going to be about as much as it's expected to save.
Okay, shareholders have concerns.
Yeah, and
what are the concerns?
Okay.
I have a guess,
Yeah.
but I'll keep my mouth
in addition,
shut.
Leadership consolidation is happening, restructuring at the executive team level. Jeremy Shepard is now Chief Marketing Officer. He has previously held USA and Canada commercial divisions. Michael Mazik has been named the President of the Americas. He's overseeing USA, Canada, and now covering Mexico, South and Central America. European President Yanis Pafis will add Africa and Asia Pacific to his responsibilities. And Chris Gavin joins the executive leadership team as Chief Strategy Officer. She's been in her position for 20 years with roles in HR, financing, marketing, and commercial organization. These moves come after a disappointing series of financial results. For the first 6 months of fiscal 2025, Brown-Forman has reported flat organic sales due to the group's struggling whiskey, tequila, and Scotch portfolios. So my second story here dovetails this first. The bourbon slowdown is official and undeniably real. Ongoing sales declines, inventory pileups at distributors as well as retailers. Bottles on retail shelves are gathering dust. They're getting even dustier this year. Bottles formerly tagged in the $70 range are now starting to slip. Some of them have gone down to $40. There's a lot of product that's getting discontinued on the shelves. It's just not selling.
We've seen that as far as Brown-Forman is concerned. We've had a reduction in our Old Forester lineup. That's
The
in our cells.
1870 and the
1897.
Exactly.
Come to think of it, I didn't see either one of those when I was
Interesting.
at my liquor store over here.
Interesting.
I only saw 86 and 1910 and 1920.
Very interesting.
So, Brown-Forman is one of the world's largest whiskey producers. After they've closed their two cooperages, they don't have a cooperage anymore. This is ultimately going to lead to reduced productions. I mean, bottom line, they're not going to be making as much whiskey in 2025 as they made in 2024, as much in 2023, and so on. Using Brown-Forman's situation and a 10-year measuring rod, At the end of 2015, now we're going back 10 years, its stock traded around $40 a share. In 2020, it reached its all-time high. We all remember what happened in 2020. We got COVID going on, everybody's staying home buying liquor. It reached $81 a share. At the time, Brown-Forman's market cap was $39 billion. Market cap simply a way to measure value of a public traded company. After the restructuring announcement here earlier in January, Brown-Forman's stock price was just under $35 a share. So it's at a lower market number than it was in 2015. And their market cap had hit $16 billion. So it had dropped from 39 to 16. That's a stock price drop of 57% and a devaluation of the company's worth by 59%. So that's really why they're making these changes. Stockholders are saying, you know, we can't continue to do the same thing that you're doing and expecting better results. To be fair, Brown-Forman is very diversified, and some of that portfolio went away. Finlandia vodka was sold off. Early Times bourbon got sold back to Sazerac, and then Sonoma Cutler wines also was sold off. That said, where Brown-Forman goes, the industry usually follows. There are murmurings of other job cuts at other distilleries that are happening too, and they've been going on for some time. Prices for barrels of maturing whiskey are also falling. They're falling faster than they rose during the buying binge of the past 6 years. Yet large distilleries are still under construction, and we'll talk about that in a minute too. Now listeners, those of you hearing this report may be salivating at the chance to get more bourbon at lower prices. Please, please, please stifle that glee. These Brown-Forman and other employment numbers are just part of the industry-wide layoffs. I'm sure there's going to be other job casualties.
Which affect very real people.
Absolutely.
And that's really devastating to hear. You know, we covered Brown-Forman and other distilleries each of these seasons. There'll be another distillery covered here in the next couple episodes or so. And if you know anything about those episodes, there's a real familial element that happens in all of those distilleries, between all of those distilleries, where history and family and tradition play really, really big roles here. So to know that layoffs were this severe is devastating on a lot of different levels.
And Brown-Forman is very, very philanthropic. I mean, they support the arts. Yeah. They support a lot of really good things.
They do.
So my third story, a positive note to wrap up this news, is Buffalo Trace's $1 billion expansion may mean more for your favorite whiskey. Back in 2015, Kentucky distiller Buffalo Trace announced a major expansion. 10 years later, it's finally done. Work is coming to an end with the expansion production capacity. It can be increased as much as 150%.
If they're not as impacted by the layoffs, or if they find some way to circumnavigate that situation by automating some of their processes and not having as much of the human element incorporated in.
They've spent $1.2 billion. Certainly an expensive gamble, but that's the nature of the whiskey business. Distilleries are making product which won't be ready for years, sometimes more than a decade.
Yeah.
You know, it's impossible to predict future markets. As we end January here, 2025, yes, as we end January 2025, Buffalo Trace will mark the filling of its 9 millionth barrel of whiskey. It's just, I can't even imagine. Back in 2015, when the expansion started, they had 400 employees, and the distillery was producing 200,000 barrels of bourbon a year. It's now filling 500,000 with double the amount of workers. So 800 workers there. Certainly smaller company than Brown-Forman. You know, I was looking the other day trying to see why there isn't as much Buffalo Trace. Well, here it is. They're not making as much. This increase, it's due to a new still house that was completed in 2022. There's 8 new 95,000 gallon fermenters, a new boiler house, 19 new rick houses for storing, new bottling operations, and a new and bigger distribution center. I suppose that's good news for fans of allocated Buffalo Trace brands like E.H. Taylor, George C. Stagg, Pappy, W.L. Weller, and maybe some of the other Buffalo Trace antique collection. But according to the representatives at the distillery, every year Buffalo Trace will continue to increase production volumes of all of its brands. That tells me we're going to see probably more Buffalo Trace, Eagle Rare, and Blanton's, and probably Benchmark than anything else. It's kind of good, but just keep in mind that we're in for a rough go of it. New bottles to search for. Our next whiskey scavenger hunt to kind of lighten the load here. We drank some Woodford tonight. We talked about the double oaked. Well, they have a line out called Woodford Reserved Double Oaked, and it's going to go national. The double oak simply means it's been in oak twice as long, twice as much. Double oak will now be available in select retailers across the U.S. Not to be confused with Woodford Reserve's double oak. The double oak previously sold out in hours when it was just a distillery exclusive. The double oak takes fully matured Woodford Reserve double oak and finishes it for an additional 2 years in a second heavily toasted, lightly charred new oak barrel. The extra exposure to the new oak imparts delicate but spicier notes.
We'll see.
Yep. My next story and my final story tonight, Stranahan's debuts Founders Release Single Malt. Kind of hoping I can find some of this. This past December 2024, after years of distiller and public debate, the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Trade Bureau, the TTB, approved the guidelines for American single malt. The decision comes after nearly 2 years of category submission requests. Went live on January 19th this year. It became an official whiskey category. To commemorate the occasion, Stranahan's has unveiled their Founders Reserve, Vital Stats, American Single Malt, Proximo Spirits, mashbill 100% malt barley, barrel entry proof is unpublished, aged 12 years old. Very old American single malt.
Yeah.
And they're finishing it in used bourbon and blonde ale casks, put out at 120 proof, with a fairly healthy price tag of $200. That's our news stories tonight. These are just a couple of the latest releases. As always, to learn more about these and many other offerings, go to our website, Whiskey for the Ages, look under the podcast archive section, and click on the episode you want to read.
And listen to.
You got it. All right, that's our show tonight. What do you think?
This was a fun one. I feel like it can be translated into episodes in future seasons down the line, maybe with other different types. We talked a little bit about wheated whiskeys. That could be something that we play with. Laura was talking about barley the other night too, and could play with some scotches and single malts.
Bread.
Yeah, so that could be something that definitely comes up. I think this was a fun episode. I think I proved my point that I've held for a very long time, that ryes are not spicy, that's not their main claim to fame, and give them a try if that's what's been your holdup, because you may be pleasantly surprised by what they actually can and do offer.
Whiskey is so subjective. You have your own opinions about so many things. Hannah and I disagree more than we agree whenever we review stuff.
It's true.
Seriously.
It's true.
Out of you guys, I probably agree with Dad more often than I agree with Hannah on reviews.
You taste more stuff than I do, though.
Yeah.
Your palate's wider.
Essentially, don't believe everything that you hear. Seriously, like don't fall into the stereotypical oh well, ryes are more spicy. I don't know, or bourbon's so sweet, because you really don't know until you really delve into that.
It's true, and go and do our experiment that we did tonight. Buy a couple of the ones that we had here in our lineup. They should all hopefully be accessible and leaning towards the more affordable side for you. And I think it's a fun experiment. I just do. I think it's fun. I think it challenges your perceptions and gives you a lot of time to kind of play and figure out flavors and have your flavor wheel ready to go and see how things change with each sip, with each bite of the bread.
It certainly is a great way to grow your palate.
Yeah. All of these were hovering in the $25 to $40 mark. So go find the one that works for you. And if you have another one that you would be curious to hear our thoughts on, certainly let us know. But let's go ahead and wrap this episode up and talk a little bit about what's coming down the pike. We still have some more reviews that are left for you. We're going to do our mid-season review like what we installed in the program last season. And we're going to be continuing to have our season finale be a review. Still going to be doing distillery and whiskey spotlights, whether that'll be with proof or something different, to be determined.
I may get Hannah involved here and have her take on a role here pretty soon.
We'll see.
Yeah.
And then we'll still be including some tips. We love giving you guys tips on everything. Still whiskey
Kind of like
history.
we did here tonight.
Kind of like what we did here tonight. We'll play around with that a little bit more, maybe have a guest on. And we still have a couple of surprises in store under our slow pour banner, similar to what Alora did last episode with having the food pairings. There might be some new things that'll be coming your way here soon. So be on the lookout.
Well, thank you so much for listening in. Send your comments.
Please subscribe. If you know someone who also really, really likes whiskey but wants to learn more, encourage them to follow us as well. We'd love to hear all sorts of thoughts from well-seasoned people, brand new people, just anyone. If you have an opinion, please share it.
Our skin is fairly thick.
It's true.
Oh, yeah.
That's not to say we won't
You
get our
can
feelings
really
hurt.
disagree with us.
Be
If you
polite.
can really disagree with us. Okay.
Yeah, we might not know what we're talking about.
It's possible.
Yeah.
Well, so ends another episode. As we do every episode, we like to give a ring of the Glencairn. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.